that failed to not be able to play today?
About 5 o'clock.
Did she say that there was pain? How did that all kind of come to pass?
Just woke up with some stiffness and some soreness, and we like to see, again, like I always say, like, how do you respond after a workout? Is it for us, it's not the time to take a chance. We just really want to be.
There is a breaking point in professional sports where frustration stops being hidden behind polite post-game interviews and carefully rehearsed media answers. And after what just happened to the Indiana Fever, that breaking point may have officially arrived. Because what unfolded in the final moments of this game was not just another painful loss, it was a full-scale coaching disaster that completely exposed the growing tension inside the Fever organization. Stephanie White made a ruthless late-game decision that instantly backfired. The entire arena felt the momentum collapse in real time, and Caitlin Clark looked absolutely furious watching the chaos unfold around her. The Indiana Fever had control, they had momentum, they had the crowd completely engaged. And most importantly, they had Caitlin Clark orchestrating the offense at a level that once again proved why she is the engine carrying this franchise into national relevance. But instead of leaning into the one thing that consistently works, the Fever coaching staff once again drifted into panic mode during the most critical stretch of the game. And Fever fans are now asking a brutal question that the organization desperately does not want to answer. Is Stephanie White actually holding Caitlin Clark back? Well, narratives break down the psychological warfare happening across the league and uncover the exact moments that are changing the future of women's basketball forever. And today, we are ripping apart the final minutes of this Fever collapse because the decisions that were made down the stretch were so unbelievably reckless that even longtime WNBA analysts were left stunned watching it happen live. Everything was building perfectly for Indiana early. Caitlin Clark was controlling the tempo, creating clean looks, stretching the defense far beyond the three-point line, and forcing defenders into impossible situations. Every time the Fever allowed Clark to operate freely, the offense immediately looked dangerous. The spacing improved, transition opportunities opened up, defenders started panicking, the crowd got louder. The energy shifted completely in Indiana's favor. But then, the exact same pattern that has haunted this team all season suddenly returned at the worst possible moment imaginable. Instead of continuing to run the offense through Clark, Stephanie White made the baffling decision to slow everything down and completely change the rhythm that had been working all night. The ball stopped moving with urgency. Possessions became stagnant, players started hesitating, and within minutes, the Fever looked like an entirely different basketball team. Fans immediately noticed it. Social media exploded in real time, and the frustration became impossible to ignore because this is no longer an isolated incident. Fever fans have watched this exact movie over and over again. Caitlin Clark gets hot, the offense becomes unstoppable, the team builds momentum, and then suddenly the coaching staff abandons the formula that created the success in the first place. It is becoming one of the most frustrating patterns in the entire WNBA. And what made this situation even worse was Caitlin Clark's visible reaction during the collapse. There was a moment late in the game where cameras caught Clark staring toward the bench with a look that fans immediately interpreted as pure disbelief. Not confusion, not exhaustion, disbelief. Like she could not understand why the offense was being completely redirected away from the strategy that had been dominating earlier in the game. That single moment sent the basketball world into a frenzy. Because for weeks now, Fever fans have quietly been building a theory that the organization is trying too hard to force a balanced system instead of fully unleashing the generational superstar sitting directly in front of them. And after this latest collapse, that theory no longer feels like paranoia. It feels increasingly difficult to deny. The modern WNBA revolves around pace, spacing, shot creation, and transition pressure. Caitlin Clark excels at every single one of those things at an elite level. She forces defenses to extend themselves to uncomfortable distances. She manipulates defenders with movement before the play even develops. And most importantly, she generates offensive panic. That is something only true superstar players can do consistently. Defenses panic when she touches the basketball. But during the closing stretch of this game, the Fever completely abandoned that advantage. Instead of attacking quickly, they slowed into predictable half-court sets. Instead of allowing Clark to create, possessions drifted toward passive isolation basketball. Instead of forcing defenders into chaos, Indiana became cautious, hesitant, and unbelievably easy to guard. The result was catastrophic. Missed opportunities piled up, defensive pressure intensified, transition chances disappeared, and suddenly a game the Fever should have controlled turned into a complete nightmare. Even worse, opposing defenders immediately sensed the shift. The second Clark stopped aggressively dictating possessions, the energy completely changed. Defenders became more confident. Passing lanes tightened. Traps became more aggressive. And Indiana looked completely unprepared for the pressure that followed. This is exactly why so many fans are now furious with Stephanie White's overall philosophy. Because when you have a player like Caitlin Clark, you do not reduce aggression late in games. You increase it. You do not take the ball out of her hands. You empower her even more. The greatest offensive players in basketball history are not built to become spectators during crunch time. They are built to control it. And yet somehow the Fever continue drifting away from that reality in the biggest moments. What makes this even more painful is that Caitlin Clark has repeatedly shown she can handle the pressure. We are talking about a player who entered the league carrying historic expectations, transformed television ratings almost overnight, sold out arenas across the country, and still continues producing under an unbelievable level of physical and psychological pressure. Every single game she is targeted. Every single game defenders try to frustrate her physically. Every single game, opposing crowds treat her like the villain. And despite all of that, she continues generating offense at a historic level. Which is exactly why fans are becoming increasingly impatient with the coaching decisions surrounding her. There is a growing belief among Fever supporters that the organization is overthinking something that should actually be very simple. Caitlin Clark is not a role player. She is not a developmental prospect. She is not a secondary offensive piece that needs to fit quietly into a system. She is the system. The offense reaches its highest ceiling when she is fully empowered to attack, create chaos, and dictate tempo without hesitation. And when that aggression disappears, the entire structure collapses. That is exactly what happened here. As the game slipped away, frustration on the Fever bench became impossible to ignore. Body language started deteriorating, players looked tense, communication broke down defensively. Possessions became rushed and disorganized, and the emotional contrast between the two teams became incredibly obvious. One team looked confident and aggressive, the other looked terrified of making mistakes. That emotional hesitation is deadly in professional basketball, especially in close games where momentum changes instantly. The most alarming part of this entire situation is that fans are beginning to question whether the Fever coaching staff truly understands what kind of superstar they actually have. Because generational offensive players are rare, they change the geometry of the sport itself. And when you hesitate to fully unleash that kind of talent, you create unnecessary limitations that eventually become impossible to hide. The reaction online after the game was absolutely explosive. Fans accused the coaching staff of sabotaging momentum. Others claimed the Fever are trying too hard to fit Clark into traditional WNBA structures instead of rebuilding the offense entirely around her strengths. Some even argued that the organization still does not fully grasp how dramatically Caitlin Clark has already changed the economics and visibility of the league itself. And honestly, after this collapse, those conversations are only going to intensify, because the final possessions were brutal. The spacing looked broken. Timing disappeared completely. Offensive confidence evaporated. And every second that passed without Clark aggressively controlling the action only increased the frustration inside the arena. Fans could feel the collapse happening before the final buzzer even sounded. That is the terrifying part. This did not feel random. It felt familiar. And familiarity creates panic because repeated late-game collapses eventually destroy trust between fans and coaching staffs. Supporters can tolerate losses when the process makes sense. What they cannot tolerate is watching the exact same mistakes repeat themselves over and over again while the franchise centerpiece visibly looks frustrated on the court. Caitlin Clark is fiercely competitive. That has been obvious from the moment she entered college basketball. She wants control. She wants responsibility. She wants pressure. The biggest moments do not scare her. They energize her. And that is why fans become so angry when the Fever appear reluctant to fully embrace her offensive instincts late in games. Because every second the ball is removed from Clark's control feels like wasted potential. And now, the pressure surrounding Stephanie White is officially reaching another level. The criticism is no longer limited to random social media reactions. Major basketball personalities are beginning to openly question the Fever's late-game identity. Analysts are dissecting crunch time possessions. Former players are discussing offensive rhythm issues. And fans are becoming louder after every single frustrating loss. The dangerous part for Indiana is that once public confidence in coaching begins to crack, every future mistake becomes magnified. Every rotation decision gets questioned. Every timeout becomes controversial. Every offensive drought turns into evidence for frustrated fans who already believe something is fundamentally wrong. And right now, the Fever are dangerously close to reaching that point. The reality is simple. Caitlin Clark has already proven she can elevate this franchise into something nationally significant. Ratings explode when she plays. Crowds erupt every time she touches the basketball. Opposing arenas treat Fever games like playoff events. The attention surrounding this team is unlike anything the modern WNBA has experienced in years, which means the expectations are no longer small. Fans are not interested in patient rebuilding narratives anymore. They want urgency. They want aggression. They want the Fever to stop operating scared and start fully committing to the superstar who transformed the franchise almost instantly. And after this latest collapse, the tension between those expectations and the coaching decisions is becoming impossible to ignore. Stephanie White's late-game strategy did not just cost Indiana a basketball game. It intensified the growing belief that the Fever are still struggling to fully understand how to maximize the most important player in women's basketball. That is why fans are furious. That is why social media exploded. And that is why this story is not going away anytime soon. Because every loss increases the pressure, every collapse fuels the criticism, and every visible moment of frustration from Caitlin Clark sends the basketball world into complete chaos. The Fever still have time to fix this, but the margin for error is shrinking rapidly. The league is watching, the fans are watching, and most importantly, Caitlin Clark is watching. And if these late-game disasters continue piling up, the questions surrounding Stephanie White are only going to get louder, more aggressive, and impossible for the organization to avoid.